For centuries, right, the world was basically run by tradition, by kings who said God put them there. But then, a completely new, powerful idea started to catch on. The idea that we, using our own minds, using reason, could build a perfect world. That was the Enlightenment. And today we're going to dig into the huge, ambitious question at its very core.
So this is the question that really lit the fuse for a whole new era. And it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was actually born from this mind-blowing discovery in the century right before. A discovery that basically pulled back the curtain on how the universe actually works. Okay, so it all kicks off with guys like Isaac Newton. He's the one who showed that the universe wasn't just some chaotic, mysterious place. Nope, it was an orderly, knowable machine. The same exact laws that make an apple fall from a tree are the ones keeping planets in orbit. Think about that. And once people saw that, it was like a light bulb went off. They started asking this incredible question. Hey, if we can figure out the laws of physics, couldn't we also figure out the laws for a perfect society? The laws of justice, liberty, and human happiness?
And that question, it sparked a total revolution of the mind. It fundamentally changed how people even thought about knowledge itself.
So the philosophical starting gun, you could say, was fired by this guy, René Descartes. And honestly, he had a problem that probably feels super familiar to us today. He just looked around at everything he'd ever been taught and thought, how do I know any of this is actually true? Your senses can fool you, right? What other people tell you could be totally wrong. So he decided to do something pretty radical. He came up with what we call the method of doubt. Basically, he decided to just doubt everything. Systematically, he threw out every single belief, every assumption he had, trying to see if there was anything left at the bottom, one single thing that was absolutely impossible to doubt. He was looking for bedrock, a solid foundation to build all of knowledge back up from.
And boom, this is what he landed on, the one thing he couldn't doubt. He realized that even if an evil demon was tricking him about everything, the very fact that he was doubting, that he was thinking, proved that he existed. I think, therefore I am. And wow, this was huge. It made the individual human mind, your mind, my mind, the starting point for all truth. That is a massive shift away from just accepting what tradition or the church tells you.
Okay, so with this newfound confidence in the power of human reason, thinkers started to look beyond just philosophy. They turned their sights on the real world. They literally started drawing up blueprints for a better society.
And when it comes to those blueprints, maybe no one was more important than John Locke. He decided to tackle the biggest question there is in politics. Where does a government get the right to rule? Why should any of us listen to it? And let me tell you, his answer changed everything.
Locke's starting point was this incredibly powerful idea of natural rights. He said that way before there were any kings or governments, every single human being already had rights to life, liberty, and property. These aren't gifts from a monarch that can be snatched away on a whim. No, they're yours just because you exist. They are fundamental. So that leads to his big answer about where power comes from. He said governments are created through a social contract. Think of it like a deal. We, the people, agree to be governed. We give up a little bit of our total freedom in exchange for one thing: the government's protection of our natural rights. That's its only job. And this means a government is only legitimate if it has the consent of the governed. Power doesn't come from God anymore. It comes from us. You can't overstate how revolutionary that was. All right, so next up we've got Baron de Montesquieu, who kind of built on what Locke started. He was like an engineer for governments. He studied them all through history with a really scientific eye because he was obsessed with solving one critical problem. How do you stop power from corrupting people and turning into tyranny? And his brilliant answer was the separation of powers. He noticed a pattern. Whenever too much power ends up in the hands of one person or one group, things go bad. So the solution? Split the government up. You create a legislative branch to make laws, an executive branch to enforce them, and a judicial branch to interpret them. And, this is the key part, you give each branch the ability to check the power of the other two. It was basically the ultimate safety switch to prevent tyranny. But, not everyone in the Enlightenment thought the answer was just better government design. Enter Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was the real radical of the bunch. He looked around at so-called civilized society, and he didn't see progress. He saw corruption. This famous line just nails his entire philosophy. Rousseau believed that human beings in our natural state are actually good and free. He argued it's society itself, with all its rules, its private property, its inequality, that has messed us up, and put us in these chains.
So what was his solution? Something he called the general will. Now, this is a tricky one. It's not just what most people want, like in a simple vote. It's supposed to be this deeper, common good of the whole community. And Rousseau said a just government's only job is to follow that general will. Now, that sounds good, but as we're about to see, it's an idea that can be both really powerful and really dangerous. And right here, you can see one of the great fault lines in all of modern politics, and it really starts with these two guys. On one side, you have Locke, who's all about protecting individual rights from the government. But on the other side, you've got Rousseau, who's focused on the general will, the good of the whole community, which, might just mean trampling on what some individuals want. So, you've got all these explosive new ideas floating around about individual rights, where government gets its power, all of it. But how do you actually spread these ideas? Especially when the people in charge, the king, the church, see them as incredibly dangerous. Well, you create something like this, the encyclopedia. This thing was the Enlightenment's most ambitious project, hands down. We're talking 35 volumes, over 70,000 articles, trying to collect all of human knowledge. But, and this is the sneaky part, it was also a political weapon. Just by putting an article about, say, how to be a good blacksmith right next to an article on theology, it was sending a message. It was saying that practical, human knowledge is just as important as religious dogma. It was a direct attack on the old authorities, meant to put knowledge into the hands of everyone. And of course, ideas this powerful don't just stay in books. They exploded out into the real world, and they helped spark two of the most important revolutions in history. But with two very, very different outcomes. I mean, just listen to this. You honestly can't find a purer expression of Enlightenment ideals anywhere. The American Declaration of Independence, it's like the Enlightenment put to music.
Seriously, this is John Locke's philosophy in action. Self-evident truths, unalienable rights, a government that gets its power from the consent of the governed. That's the social contract, right there being written down for the whole world to see. But then, just over a decade later, another revolution kicks off in France. It starts with those same ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity. But it takes a very different and much darker path.
So what was the difference? A lot of it comes down to their philosophical starting points. The American Revolution, it was based on Locke's ideas of specific God-given rights. It didn't try to tear everything down. The French Revolution, though, was way more inspired by Rousseau's very abstract idea of the general will. They tried to just scrap everything, tradition, religion, the whole shebang, and rebuild a perfect society based only on reason. And that path? Well, it led directly to the Reign of Terror and the guillotine. And that really gets to the complicated legacy of the Enlightenment. On the one hand, it gave us the very language we use to talk about rights, freedom, and democracy. But it also left us with a chilling warning that human reason, when it gets arrogant, when it thinks it can just erase the past and engineer a perfect world, it can become a really destructive force. Which leaves us with a question that is just as important today as it was back then.